Hello, my name is William DeBoard, and this is my history project about the Battle of Chickamauga. But before we get into the battle and the troop movements and the outcome of the battle, I want to talk a little bit about the underdogs of the Civil War, the Army of Tennessee. The Confederate Army of Tennessee at this time was under General Braxton Bragg. And as you can see here, this is what typically the Army of Tennessee would have been dressed in at this time. The jacket is a Columbus depot jacket. The hat is a civilian slouch hat, and a lot of soldiers preferred this style of civilian hat because it would block the rain, it blocked the sun from burning their face, burning their back. The trousers, trousers or pants. This is just a simple civilian cotton style pants of the time period. A lot of soldiers would write home and have their family ship them clothing so they could wear. So in the summer months, cotton would be a lot more cooler than wearing a jean cloth style of trousers. And the word jean cloth is a mixture of cotton and wool mixed together to make the jean cloth material to make the jackets, pants. And at the start of the war, they were using 100% wool material to make the uniforms, but in the South, as resources started getting scarce, they started coming up with ways to cut cost and make things at a cheaper cost. So the shoes is a English import shoe. If you look at the bottom, it's got a heel plate that's made of steel to protect the heel so it'll last longer, and these little nails will protect the leather sole from marching 18 to 25 miles a day, and it just keeps the shoes lasting longer. And their English import, the Confederacy was getting a lot of supplies from England, from France, and other areas in Europe at the time. And come up here for a table. This musket is a rifle musket. It's the 1853 Tower Enfield rifle musket. It was used on both sides during the war, north and south. And the reason why that it's a rifle musket, because inside the barrel it's got grooves that will help this bullet. It'll cause the bullet to turn when it's coming out of the gun, and it'll keep it accurate to up to 300 yards. The old flintlock style muskets were not rifled, and they were accurate at distances of 60 to 70 yards. So this musket is a major improvement during the war. The tactics didn't change from the Napoleonic era, but the weaponry did, and it caused major casualties because both sides did not change the way that they fought the war. So in this bullet is a 58 caliber 3-ring mini ball from the Civil War. It's actually original. It's a drop bullet. It was never fired. And this is an arsenal pack of ammo. It contains 10 rounds of ammo and a little paper tube of caps on the side, which goes, the cap goes right here. It's just like a cap gun. When you pull the trigger, a hammer drops onto the cap, creates fire, and it goes down to the barrel and it sets off the gunpowder. And how the cartridges are set up, they're made of paper. Your mini ball or bullet would be right here, and your gunpowder is right here. So you'd have to tear this end off with your teeth, pour the powder down the barrel, then take the paper and wadding in the bullet itself, push it down to the end of the barrel, and take the ramrod right here and ram it all the way down the barrel. Then you would have to put the cap onto the cone, and then you're ready to fire. And we'll start on this side of the table. This is my haversack, and inside my haversack it contains cup, plate, could be hardtack, and this is what they call hardtack. It is a hard cracker, and it's a substitute for bread to keep bread longer, and that's where it gets its name, hardtack, because it's very, very hard. You could fry this in bacon grease to soften it up, or you can soak it in coffee or water, or you can just take your musket and put it on a plate and hammer it till you turn it into a fine powder, and you can eat it that way. And this here is bacon or salt pork. And the bacon is one of the main sources of meat for the North and the South that was fighting during the war. They would cook the bacon, cut it up in small pieces. They'd cook the bacon and get the grease, and they would use the grease to cook other items. But you could have a handkerchief in your haversack. You have, now this little invention could have been bought from a newspaper. It's a knife, fork, and spoon combination that comes apart. You have your knife, your spoon, and your fork. Now, a lot of soldiers during that time period, which I've seen many of these dug on battlefields and in campsites, they would just take the knife part, close it up, and put it in their pocket and use it as a pocket knife, and it would get lost along the way. Or they would have the conventional silverware of the time period. This is what every household home during that time period would have plenty of. A pewter spoon, forks like this, or knife like this. And they would bring eating utensils from home to use. And here we have a 10-drum canteen used in other conflicts earlier to the Civil War. The Confederacy continued to use this. And here is a Confederate cartridge box. This is copied from an original that was found at the Battle of Gettysburg that is documented to General Longstreet's men at the Battle of Gettysburg. So it'd be a perfect cartridge box to have been used at the Battle of Chickamauga. And inside, this is where your ammunition goes. Your loose rounds goes up top. And in the bottom, that's where your arsenal pack would have went. And your rifle musket tool would have went inside this pouch right here. And also on the table is a smoking pipe. A lot of the men like to smoke. And over here is your waist belt, your cap box, and here is where all your loose caps would go. That would go right there to fire the musket. And also your bayonet, which goes on the end of the rifle. A lot of soldiers hated bayonet charges. They didn't want to get that close to the enemy, and just like today, it's not natural to stab someone with a bayonet. So a lot of soldiers hated bayonet charges. Over here is the knapsack. It's basically a backpack, just like all the students carry at Walter State. And this is a Mexican War style knapsack. And here again, Confederates continue on using the same resources that was used in earlier conflicts. And inside, have a blanket here, a shirt, a pair of socks in here. But the way I have mine set up is I have a civilian coverlet, and this coverlet is it's a cotton style blanket, but it's woven on looms, and this pattern of coverlet is a Tennessee pattern that is common to the state of Tennessee. And over here on this side, I have a captured Federal or Yankee rubber blanket. And this is made of vulcanized rubber, which is of the time period. It's dirty, it's got grass on it, and you can use it to lay on at night, or if it's raining, you see how it's got these little grommets in it. Take a piece of string and tie it through the grommets, and it goes around your neck, and you can wear it as a cape to somewhat keep yourself dry. But rubber was a major item that was relatively new to the time period. And this is a Goodyear pattern rubberized ground cloth. And it's to not get it confused with Goodyear tires, because Charles Goodyear, that came up with vulcanized rubber, is not the same person that made Goodyear tires. And like I said, at night, put the black part on the ground and sleep on the white part and cover up in your blanket. And over here is my trusty companion. We're going to name him Isaac, from Ohio. And this is what the Army of the Cumberland would have been wearing at the time of Chickamauga. This overcoat is a winter overcoat. They would have still been in storage at the time, but I wanted you guys to see what a Union winter overcoat looked like. And it's got a cape on it to keep your shoulders warm, or you can turn it into somewhat of a hood. but like I said, at the time of Chickamauga, in September of 1863, Isaac here would not have been wearing his overcoat, but on the night of the first day's fight, he would have loved to have had this overcoat because the temperatures got down into freezing. But this is what Isaac would have probably looked like. A lot of the units in the Army of the Cumberland would have looked like at the time of Chickamauga. He's wearing a 4-button sack coat or fatigue blouse. It's a lightweight coat. It's made of wool. And it's got a thin wool liner in it. His suspenders, and that is elastic, and elastic was available at the time of the Civil War. It's a high-end item. Few people could afford it. A lot of people couldn't. So Isaac came from a family of means because he's got elastic suspenders. And this is his federal trousers or pants that he would have been issued from the Army. He would have got his fatigue blouse issued from the Army, and his Domet flannel issue shirt. And this hat, before he customized it to his own personality, was an 1858 dress hat. It would have been decked out with a hat cord and all the brass instruments that goes onto the hat, but he chose to use it as protection from the sun, rain, and after a couple of good times in the field and it's rained on it, all the hats would have started looking like this. We're going to move Isaac out of the way. And if we look back here, I've got a small collection of hats of what soldiers would have possibly worn during the Civil War and at the Battle of Chickamauga. Over here is Confederate hats on the left, and on the right is Federal or Union hats. The two hats in the back is civilian hats that would have been shipped from home. And in the front, these hats are called kepis. These are designed from the French, what the French Army was wearing at the time. And the French Army continued to wear this style of hat all the way up until World War I. And this is a Confederate captain's hat. It's a little bit fancier than your normal enlisted or privates, sergeant's hats. This hat has gold brim or gold trim all over the hat, and it's got two lines of gold trim. That means that he's a captain. The fewer the lines, if it's one line, it's lieutenant, two's a captain, and on up to general. And this hat, even though I know it looks blue from a distance, this hat right here and this kind of material played a very important role at the Battle of Chickamauga. The material here is English Army cloth. This is the same cloth that the English Army at the time was making their greatcoats out of. From a distance it looks blue, but the closer you get, it's got a blue-gray tint to it. And English script I buttons. The I stands for infantry. This is the style of hat or the material that the hats General Longstreet's Corps, 1st Corps Army in Northern Virginia was wearing at the Battle of Chickamauga. And at the Battle of Chickamauga is the first time that this cloth was ever seen on a Confederate soldier. And later on in the video, I'll explain why this material here played such an important role in the battle. And just like this cap, it's Confederate jean cloth. This would have been what the Army of Northern Virginia would have been wearing, the Army of Tennessee would have been wearing in the first part of the war, and the Army of Tennessee would have continued wearing this style later on throughout the war, just like the Army of Northern Virginia would have. But this material, you started seeing a lot more from the mid part of the war until the end in the Army of Northern Virginia. The blue band is the color insignia branch for infantry. Red, if it was red, it'd be artillery. If it was yellow, it'd be cavalry. If you look here, it's got Federal eagle buttons on it because the South had a huge collection when the war started of Federal accoutrements and Federal buttons, so they continued on putting this style of button on their uniforms when supplies got low. Back then, people would have just said that's a button, and they would have just put it on. And if you look over here, this is some of the hats that the Union Army would have been wearing at Chickamauga. This here would have been a private purchase officer's slouch hat. He's got the gold hat cords on his hat, but he doesn't have any insignia on his hat because he doesn't want Confederates to really know that he is an officer, or he would have been one of the first ones to have gotten killed in his unit if they could have picked him out. And officers at that time would have gotten paid extra money because they would have had to have bought their own clothing and equipment off the private market, where the enlisted soldiers would have been issued everything. And here is another slouch hat. A lot of the Federals chose black. That was predominantly the color of hat that they would have wore. Sometimes they would have worn something like this, but overall black would have been the color of choice for Federals. And this at one time was an 1858 dress hat that has been styled to a soldier's liking in the field. And this hat here is the Federal forage cap. This hat would have been worn on fatigue duty, like if they were in camp, if they had to cut firewood or clean up the camp, or if they're in the cavalry, clean up after horses or animals. This would have been the fatigue hat that would have been worn. But they also chose to wear this style of hat in the field when they were on campaign. A lot of soldiers in the Western Theater didn't like this style of hat because temperatures in the South is a lot warmer than in Virginia at the time of the war. And it doesn't really give you any protection from the sun. And overall, they just thought it was really an ugly hat.